There's a lot of people in this cluster who are studying their human design or living their human design and also studying Kabbalah. And I've been getting this question so much recently where people are saying, what is the line between knowing that you are here to live a life of joy and ease and flow versus the concept of pushing yourself to not be lazy or to take action and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and doing the extra mile of everything in life. And I think this is a good continuation to the episode we did recently called Going Slow to Go Fast, or speeding up to, what was it? Slowing down to speed up. Because it speaks so much to the bad conditioning that we've received that we tend to think that those things are antagonistic to each other, that they don't mean the same thing. I had a friend message me this morning, and this is really what crystallized it to me, is that she said she was at Rosh Hashanah with me this year at the Kabbalah Center, which is the new year. And while she was at Rosh Hashanah, which if you've been, you know, it's like so much energy for 3 days straight. You're like praying and singing and chanting and all your intentions and studying and scanning the Zohar, all these different types of things. And she was also being asked to send in an audition for pretty much what was her dream job, which I actually one day I want to have her on the podcast because how she got there is so expansive, and she's a projector, and how it's all panned out for her has been fascinating. But she was saying to me that how do you mix the two things together, where in Kabbalah 1, which she's taking Marcus Weston's Kabbalah 1, she was saying that, you know, there is this concept Kabbalistically that it's in the final stretch where you almost think you can't, where you put the final effort, where you go beyond yourself, go beyond your limitations, that you get rewarded. And she was saying, you know, I think back to that time over Rosh Hashanah when it was such full-on days and I was so exhausted as a projector, and I was also handling all this other energy of having to send in my audition and going back and forth with the people. And I know that those days were like 5 tikkun a day for me. And yet I know that they revealed so much in my life. Like, she ended up getting that audition. She ended up having that dream job, and she's living it out now, and her reality has completely changed. And she was saying to me, how do I reconcile the fact that I know when I did that, good things came? And what if I did that all the time? So my reply to her was, we don't acknowledge that life is a series of cycles. There has to be going out and going in. There has to be reassessing and then taking the action that the reassessing helped you do, like how that helps you realign the action. If there was just action, there would be no space for realignment. And if there was contemplation, and if there was only contemplation without action, then we'd also be in a special kind of torture. So the fact that we think that life is so binary is the very paradigm we're going to start to be breaking out of now, because we're also addicted to setting up these mutually exclusive choices to ourselves that actually don't exist. And the goal is actually to get really good at all the different cycles, like to elevate the quality of the part of the cycle that you're in is the goal. So when you're taking action, are you taking it as your best self? Are you taking it according to your authority? Are you taking it knowing that, you know, God, the light, the universe is behind you? Are you taking it with certainty? Are you doing it with kindness, and so on and so forth? And when you're contemplating, are you navel gazing, or are you really being honest with yourself? Are you being gently self-compassionate, but owning the part of it that is you creating the reality? So knowing that in the background, I said to her, listen, this is the special thing about action. And I say this all the time, and this is the perfect illustration of it, that you don't need more action. You need fewer right action, because her life would be so out of balance if she was at Rosh Hashanah's that level of energy all the time and just getting jobs. There'd be no time to act the jobs. There'd be no time to watch the movies come out. There'd be no time to, you know, have all the different opportunities that come from her being in that process create. There'd be no opportunity for her to be experiencing the changes when she's on set. So we need the full chain of reactions. And so I do think that sometimes our ego or our not self misunderstands that do more, do more, do more as a confirmation of what we've been really badly conditioned with, that we're actually trying to unbecome. Because when the ego is still there and the not self is still there, and it's hearing that, and we're hearing that advice through the lens of our not self, we're going, see, should have punished yourself more. See, should have pushed yourself more. And if we don't even know what we want to be applying ourselves to, which is the aligned version of pushing, right? Then that sends us into even more of a lost place, because we're like, should I just be pushing things I don't want to push? Should I just be pushing anything? Should I just be torturing myself even more, even if I don't know which direction is going to be conducive to me? So what I want us to know, and I really say this with so much understanding of how that feels, because that was genuinely the first decade of my spiritual journey, is I just thought that the more I sort of self-flagellated and drained my own life force in the promise of doing something relatively good, then I was doing well. And now I can see the difference between disciplining myself with things that really are for me because my authority has checked it out, and I'm doing it in a way that is aligned with my energy type all the way through. And that doesn't mean, for example, that if you are a generator, it doesn't mean that you're never going to put effort in. It doesn't mean that as a projector, you're never going to not feel like you're working. It just means that it's going to be something that means something to you. So even if the body gets tired, you are happy to sometimes be so full of life in your energetic body and in your aura that the body is not the limiting factor or the excuse for you to slow down. And listen, that's not to say that we need to push past that limit, because actually what most of us need to do is clock into when we've done enough. But I think it's such an important thing to remind all of ourselves about, is that pushing yourself is only good if it's aligned with you, if God, the light, wants you to do it. So it's not for us to decide that we want to give ourselves 10 heavy tasks and then praise ourselves for doing stuff that is taking up a precious day here that isn't the curriculum that life wanted you to do this day by, right? So we've so gotten far away from applying ourselves and going the extra mile in a way that is joyful, that we don't know how voluntary it can feel to do something extra when it's really enjoyable to us too. We have to not forget that our gifts and our sharing is supposed to give us life back. And that's how you really know. That's how you can tell, is that yes, you can be tested, and yes, you can be challenged, and yes, you can find it a steep learning curve, and yes, you can be coming up against shadow and tests and triggers, but there's this affinity to the thing that happens where you just love it so much that you're locked into it. And because most of us have never even been given the chance to know that feeling, it's hard to know that that even exists. But I'm here to tell you that it does, and that's where human design comes in. What Kabbalah is saying is correct, and what human design is saying is correct. It's just that we have to train ourselves to have better eyes to see a lot of the time when it comes to spiritual wisdom and sort of out of context pieces of advice, because we can take them so the wrong way if we're trying to fit them in through old lenses. So I want you to imagine a world where giving the extra is actually a joy and a pleasure for you, because you know that life is up leveling you, but only because you're in something that you know is your gifts, that you know is a thing that you're really good at, and it's going to allow you to see a greater level of you and your own capability if you make yourself and encourage yourself to stretch to that next level. It's not going to make you feel depleted and just like a martyr, and that's the fuel you're settling for, is praising yourself for being a martyr, which I think especially as women, we have that in our programming. And it's just time that if we really want to have a world where everyone is elevated and happy and free and joyful, if you really truly are a soul who comes into this world knowing that your wish for the world is to live in a world like that, where there's true heaven on earth, we have to have walked our own soul through the initiation of allowing ourselves that before our outside reality begins to reflect it. And so how the not self voice keeps us stuck is by saying, oh, there's spiritual wisdom making you go the extra mile. So why don't you misunderstand that? I'm telling you that that means that you have to bash yourself and beat yourself and go to war and come back with wounds and scars. And that's how you prove that you care so much about other people, because look how much you let yourself suffer as a result. And that's the lie that we all need to unbecome and let ourselves, like truly let ourselves be free of that lie. And that lie is so insidious and so baked into our cells at such a deep level, because it has been in our ancestral lines for hundreds, if not thousands of years, that, excavating it out is not an easy job. It's really not an easy job. And so we also have to be very graceful with ourselves in the process of how addicted we are to the struggle and the suffering. But the undoing of it starts with just realizing that those two pieces of wisdom are not antithetical to each other.
Do you remember the game Chutes and Ladders?
Yes.
Is that an American? Okay. So when people are talking about if you just take action, 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 as much action as possible to get where you want to go, of course, there's like a small percentage of those actions that are actually moving your life forward. So that is like looking at the game board of Chutes and Ladders and saying, I don't want to play the game board. If I just dig a straight hole from here to the end of the game board, I'll get there, right? Like I'm over action, action, action. But this go slow to go fast, or go slow to go fast is like, okay, if this is how the game board works, that's sometimes there's chutes and sometimes there's ladders, and sometimes I'm just going one step at a time. Sometimes I'm rolling the dice and I'm only getting one and I get to take one step forward. Sometimes I get to a ladder and I have to actually elevate myself. There's some hard things involved in climbing that ladder, but I'm moving across the game board. And then sometimes I come across a chute and I get to slide across the game board. There's the one that's on the board that basically is like almost at the beginning of the board. That's a slide or a chute that slides you all the way to the end and you win the game. So the person who's digging the hole, taking a million actions across the board, it looks like they're constantly moving, which they are. But the person who's actually playing in the game and working with the way that like life works might actually get there in a more easeful way than that person who's taking a million actions.
Yeah. And you know what it's like when you're really focused and dedicated on something, your focus really hones in on something and you're just in that dance with that thing that you're trying to make, create, think about, bring to life. And there are times when we need the opposite, where we actually need the lens to widen. And that's the perception time, right? That's the time when you're like spotting more things, receiving your next inspiration, receiving refinement, receiving ahas. Just on a practical level, we know when we're so locked into something, when we're together and we're working on, for example, a new feature in the app or a new release, and you've said this to me and I said I feel the same. It's like the whole world kind of disappears. So of course we would come here as human beings and choose to experience all the different vibes. Like we would want to be so locked in. We'd want to be so in love that the whole world doesn't exist. We'd want to be so open with all this space to just like commune with our divine intelligence and have it speak to us. We would want to have times when we like just really like soak in the like almost delicious but like basic mundaneness of watching, like being a human, like watching a silly show. And so the openness and different levels of the cycle and of brain awareness, it all has to coexist. We're only like smallening our lives by thinking that we have to choose one and not be able to master all of them so that they all become better. Like I always say to people, get better at your alone time, make it a better quality, make sure it's stuff you really enjoy. There's nothing wrong with watching a silly TV show if it's one that you find like so delightful and fun or interesting, or it gives you that feeling that, yeah, I'm like, being a pig rolling around in the mud on this planet, versus like one that is just kind of doing it because you've always done it, because you don't even really know what you're doing, because that's what you do all the time, or that's always who you've been. Anything that we're doing, thinking, or contemplating because it's something we've always done actually is up for review now. Because if it's something you've always done, it's likely that it's getting a little crusty now and it's only staying because it's part of the old furniture. So there's something to the whole action thing, though, that is also so much about divine timing, in the sense that, let's say, for example, let's take my friend. that was a peak moment of manifestation or creation in her life. Let's say at most we have one peak moment like that every few years, maybe once a year, maybe 3 times a year, 5 times a year, 10, but more is not better. And so there's something so beautiful about trusting the timing of your life, because she's also been living her design for a year and a half now before then. And the only way I believe that you can speed up the process of things coming to you is that you stop throwing yourself off as much as you did before. When you are in your lane, then I'm giggling because Taylor's pointing at me right
She's
now.
getting, when she really nails something, I often will be pointing at her.
But do you know what I mean? That's where free will and divine timing and quote unquote destiny, for want of a better word, converge, because the free will is like how much we're sort of holding it back. But when we're not holding it back and we're just being our real selves, then these peak moments are going to come when they come. And listen, trust me, I'm the most impatient person on planet Earth, as a lot of people that know me know. And I'm like, why isn't it happening sooner? Why isn't it happening sooner? And I'm really genuinely, I can honestly say, I'm only now in my life starting to be able to accept this, but because I've seen enough how beautifully timed life brings me something that my brain, as intelligent as I could ever make it be, could never do that for me, as much as my ego thinks that sooner is better. And so then it allows me to just occupy myself with my unbecoming and my living my design, because in the movie of her life, that could not have happened at a better time for her. And you and I know hundreds of people, hundreds of stories where something happened in the most unbelievable, unfathomable, couldn't have like planned it out ourselves, the way that it came in, the route that it took, the time it took. It just all happens, and it's our minds that tell ourselves that we have to be in charge of that timing, but we really don't.
Kind of how you were saying, like, there's these times when we're in life, there's these times when we're working on things. We've often even said, and I don't think this is just projectors, correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of our work is being in life. There's a lot of industries where that's true, where you have to kind of be in your life to get the ahas. So to constantly force yourself to be, what's the next action I can take, is almost distracting you from where the intel that will give you the next action to take comes from.
100%. And that's really the plague of our society, that has focused way too much on, I guess because we're so exposed to other people's outcomes in ways that we never would have been if we were like living in a, basic tribe back in the day. We're so hyper aware of the frosting of other people's lives, and we forget that that frosting is not the real, it's not the real cake, right? The change in us is in the baking of the ingredients. And that's actually the part that when you learn how to do it well, that's the part that really rewards you, because it changes who you are as a human being. When you get so in love with the baking of the cake, then the frosting is just like super fun and it's delightful and makes you happy to be alive. But we are seeing only frosting and being like, oh my gosh, then that means I have to take all this action, instead of, oh my gosh, that means I have to unbecome. That means I have to live my design. That means I have to align. And let me fall so in love with being the real me that comes out when I'm in that process, because ultimately that's why the soul wants all the things that it wants, is because those things are a reflection of who we truly are, and we come here to remember who we truly are. And so when we get those things, they're just like nice winks and then nice reminders of like, oh yeah, you got that by being you. And like you said, I love what you said about that analogy, because yes, you can take loads of action and still move forward, but it's not the same type of process or journey, and certainly not as juicy and sweet as when we prioritize the baking and not the frosting. And I also just feel that it's really a time where, oh my God, we get to do this so much for our ancestors. You know how they say when you heal something, it goes back in your ancestral line? Almost everyone listening to this has grandparents and great grandparents who went through so much suffering and went through so much struggle. And in so many ways, that the things that they accomplished get passed down to us, and their ceiling becomes the floor that we start our lives on. The things they worked hard to establish for our lives, there's some kind of beautiful paying back that we do by doing this healing in ourselves that originally was passed through them. and that we get to pass it back. That's almost the way that we pave them back. And I just feel like there is such dense ancestral energy, not dense in a way that's down, like sort of heavy or down or negative, but dense as in it's so thick, it's so ripe with wanting us to, these generations with this level of consciousness we have, they're just like desperate for us to give that to them. And there's a real like paying back to our lineage, and not necessarily believing that we're doing it all for us. And you and I were talking about this recently, or we messaged back and forth about how if we did know and saw more the context of our lives as coming from this family, this tribe, these elders, this, multi generations living on this planet, maybe our lives would be different. What was it you were saying to me about that? You were going to say something about the
Well,
different generations.
you've said this before. We stand on the shoulders of cockroaches, where everything that our generation is doing, or we stand even on the shoulders of the previous generations.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're only able to have this level of consciousness because of what previous generations did, and understanding that we are also elevating the potential floor for the generations above us. So there's this sort of thing that we're sandwiched in between, where we think we're just living our life, but we're actually um, contributing to like a mass evolution of an entire race of people. And being able to look at my grandparents and my mom and see like, oh, she did that so she could do that, and then my mom did that so I could do this. It brings like a level of, I don't know, just like reverence for even being on the game board.
Mm.
Because what a fun game to play, to say, okay, well, if I can elevate myself as high as possible, imagine what, I'm going to cry thinking about it. Imagine what the generation after us gets to do.
Mm. Yeah. And it makes you take your role in the fractal line more seriously. It's about more than just our small desires and a random human coming here and just doing, getting a house and getting a car and getting whatever. And there's a much deeper way of understanding the perfection in how this whole line of getting towards the ultimate self-expression of what it is to be human is getting us to. And we were also talking about how if we were not so separated from the presence of our elders as we are now as a society, that would be more front and center of our backdrop of our awareness of what life is. And maybe we would make different choices. Like I was saying to you, I wonder if, you know, the younger generations prioritize things like the material stuff and the sometimes shallow things because we haven't had the opportunity to be exposed as much anymore to the good stuff about life that you realize when you're 60 or 70 or 80, that you're like, oh my god, I would not go back to my 20s and give this back, because you get the joke, you get the whole point of it, you get the stuff that doesn't matter so much more. And if only that got past, like, only if only we were just exposed to that more in society, how different would even the trends on TikTok be, for example? How different would our content be? How different would the carrots that society chases would be? How much would we not worship false idols? I don't know. Maybe that's not true, but I do wonder it often, that we're so oriented towards people of our same generation instead of living vertically. We've become too horizontal almost.
I wonder though if it's because there's always been a thread of this theme of oh, all these material things are not going to actually get you what you want. But we weren't so exposed to them. And I wonder if it was kind of our generation's job to almost like gorge on that desire so that we could get to the absolute limits of that thing and realize
Mm,
the emptiness of it so that we could just like clean that up for future generations. Like it's just like, okay, guys, that is not getting us what we wanted. We tried it, all
mm.
the attention grabbing, all the yeah, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, maybe that was like the thing we had to contend with. That's so interesting. And also, I'm sure that there'll be some people listening to this that will say, no, that's what every generation does when they're young and then they learn. So who knows? It's all
But I
different
mean,
perspectives.
I think you can argue that it has been
Mm-hmm.
more aggressive
Mm-hmm.
because of the internet. And so, sure, those themes have always been present, but maybe it was ours to get to the extreme. Like there's always like a
Mm.
pendulum in the way that humans evolve where it's like we go to this extreme and then we go to this extreme and then it neutralizes. And
Yeah.
so maybe we are taking it to that extreme
Mm.
so that we can come back and we are seeing that like bring back to family, bring back to having the grandparents around, having like seeing the value of that for sure. I'm seeing it out in the world for sure.
Will you share what you said to me about how I forget the way you said it, but you said it about like how the funnest thing for you is now like going to your niece's like,
Oh,
will you please? It's so
yeah.
sweet.
I think that particularly is to do with maturing. I think we just as you get older, you go out and you're like when you're a kid, at least for me, I should share it as my experience. All I wanted was to go out into the world. And I'm very lucky to come from a very close family where family connection and multi-generational connection is very normal. And but I was the kid that wanted to get out into the world. I wanted to see every single stretch of the world that I could see and all to come to this conclusion that I would rather spend my time sitting on the sidelines of my niece and nephew's like soccer game because I don't even know why I'm getting emotional, but
I am too.
it's just the feeling that I thought would come from seeing the whole world and experiencing everything. That feeling comes from literally just that.
Mm.
And I think too, like everyone that has listened to the podcast knows that I also lost my mother-in-law recently. And so of course there's like a lot of just life experiences that bring you to that level of maturity. But yeah, there's so much more to this game
Mm.
than trying to get to your goals that you wrote down.
That's really well said, and that's also the not self and the ego conditioning that all of us are in, is that this lie that there's something better out there than in your life, like what we were saying before, like be in your life is where you have to be. That's the only place you can ever truly be is where your body is. That's one of the principles of human design, is that space is more important than time in terms of your actual location in your body on this earth is what dictates your unfolding and your path. And the minute that we kind of transport our minds to say it's over there or it's out here or it's somewhere else, I should be somewhere else, from a place of trying to get something, then we lose because we're not in the body. We're not in the movie that we're supposed to be in. And we talk about this a lot, where passenger consciousness is about being inside your body, right? You can only experience aliveness inside, no matter what is going on outside. If you see it with your own eyes, where are you feeling it? You're feeling it inside. You're feeling it right where you are. You could be watching something that's happening in Japan, but still you're sitting in Tucson and I'm sitting in London right now. And so where is it happening? It's happening in Tucson and London because it's me that's experiencing it. It's me that is having this cause a different chemical cascade in my body, right? From watching that thing, from thinking about something, from imagining something, from anything, right? So, there's that saying, be where your feet go where your feet are planted or be where your feet are planted. That's really the sort of scientific explanation for why that is only ever what's happening. And you can either know that that's what's happening, or you could try to push against it, but that's still always going to be what's happening. And so there's something so comforting about making your own life beautiful. And again, not mistaking that as being settling, right? If you're in something that doesn't make you happy, that's different. And this is where you take action and where you change. But realizing that you can't live life telling yourself that there's something better out there that you just happen to be missing all the time that's going to make you happy, because life and the universe and God is actually sending you a lot of richly rewarding things that, again, if you have your lenses and you're myopic about there's something outside of my reality that doesn't exist that's going to be the solution to my problems, you then can't be open-minded again. You can't have that wide lens. So again, it's like myopic focus when you need it, and then wide lens when you don't. Myopic focus when you need it, and wide lens when you don't. And let's not let our egos be the reasons that we myopically focus on things, because that's usually when it's wrong. It's only when there is strategy and authority that has given it the check that we are allowed to myopically focus, or when it's actually momentumly helpful for us to focus myopically, right? Because there's a lot of rabbit holes you could get stuck down and that feel like you're doing a lot because it's based on adrenaline and you're really expelling your brain power and you're really trying to concentrate, and so your ego is like, yes, go you're a badass, go. This means you're going to be successful, and you kind of like that version of yourself because society has told us to like that version of ourselves. But that's so different than when you really feel like your authority has said yes, and when it's really happened according to your strategy. That's a different myopic focus that you're not having to effort. And then the rest of the time you do get to have this like really taking in life. Like, we're so much more porous than we actually act like we are. Like, there's so much more juice to be extracted from just everyday life that it's just having different eyes to see it, where making your bed can become an incredibly delightful experience, or walking in the park can be either you're so stuck in your head that you can't even notice, or you're downloading light codes and you feel so in communion with the divine and you feel so lucky to be alive, and you can just spontaneously cry or sing or dance of joy. And saying I love you to someone can be unthought through and just delicious and coming from the soul, or it can be said because you always say it. There's so many choices about how you bring your energy to things, but it really starts with living your design and having better eyes to see. And that is where to loop it back, that's where we've covered a lot of seemingly conflicted instructions, but actually explained how they converge if you see them at the highest level, where all truths lead to Rome. Ultimately, they're all saying the same thing. We're just capturing the truth of what life is on different facets of the way that we can best put things into words. And so we'll capture the action part in one way, and then we'll capture the, alignmentness of it all in a different way. And so they come down when they get explained, and they come out. So they've kind of shot through different angles. So we can't necessarily see that they all kind of are congruent back to the same original place. I think that's the best way of describing it. But just know that if something is a truth with a capital T, it's never going to conflict anything else that you're ever going to learn, no matter what modality it is, to that other truth with a capital T. They all do converge. We just have to train ourselves to have eyes where we see that they all mean the same thing.
Right. And living an easeful life does not mean you're not overcoming challenges. It means, like you said, understanding that there is this zoom out and zoom in, this go in, this pull out, and that being easeful, and the fact that that's the game that we're all playing together, that's what makes it easeful, not the fact that there's no challenges and that you're not ever pushing yourself.
No. And life is always going to send us challenges, because that's how we sometimes need an acute sting to when we're really ready for an up level. And again, that comes back to a divine timing, right? So those are blessings in disguise. There's only two things on this planet. There's blessings and there's blessings in disguise. There's light and there's light in disguise. So again, that the timing of those happens just as beautifully when we are not veering ourselves off our own personal alignment by not living our design. And there's a different texture and different quality when you can meet those types of moments as you're wise, when you're pulling on the part of you that is like your wise, quote unquote, higher self, the one that is more compassionate, the one that is more patient, still painful, like you said, still doesn't, it's not that it doesn't hurt. It's just that you are more of a master at transforming it and alchemizing it into something that was meant to be alchemized into. So no matter what it is that, whatever floats your spiritual boat, when you hear your brain say, how does this agree with this? Even if you don't know how it does yet, just know that the resistance that you have to accepting even both could be true is only because we've been taught that, there's right and wrong, and there's better and there's worse, and there's all this stuff in the world. And actually, whatever is of the light is in agreement with everything else that is of the light. And that's where we came from. That's what we are.